"There's no space for you inside," security said at our annual achievement gala. Through the glass, I saw the person who stole my campaign accepting my award. Even the new hires got seats. I stood there in my carefully chosen dress, a receipt for $430 still in my purse, as Linnea took center stage. My campaign, my idea, my execution, her credit. "Ma'am, I need you to step aside. There are actual guests trying to enter." The security guard's voice carried just loud enough that several colleagues turned to stare. I recognized pity in some faces, amusement in others. 3 months of systematic exclusion, culminating in this public humiliation. "There must be some mistake," I said, fumbling with my phone to show the email invitation. "No mistake. Your name was removed from the list this morning." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched as Linnea accepted the crystal trophy for the Authentic Voices campaign. The campaign that had saved our struggling company. The campaign born during my weekend without sleep, when I'd realized that our industry's polished messaging had created a trust deficit. "Our groundbreaking approach showcases real people with real stories," Linnea was saying, her voice crystal clear through the glass. My exact words from the pitch deck. I stepped back from the entrance, dignity somehow intact despite the burning behind my eyes. The security guard had already turned away, dismissing me as irrelevant. Inside, executives clinked champagne glasses, while monitors displayed the faces of people whose stories I had personally collected. People who weren't invited tonight. That's when I knew exactly what to do. I pulled out my phone, opened my contacts, and sent one message. Then I walked to my car, heels clicking against the pavement as I crossed the darkened parking lot. 20 minutes later, my phone exploded with notifications as I sat watching from my car. The chairman emerged from the building, frantically scanning the parking lot. When he spotted my vehicle, he ran toward me. Actually ran, in his $3,000 suit, sweat visible even in the dim light. If you're still with me in this story, I want to thank you for listening. Sometimes we need to hear how others stood up for themselves to find our own courage. If this resonates with you, please like and subscribe for more authentic stories about workplace justice. I'd also love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Now, let me tell you what happened next and how this all began. My name is Everly, and until 3 months ago, I was the marketing director for a health services company that desperately needed a rebrand. I've always been the person who works twice as hard with half the recognition, the one who shows up earlier, stays later, and gets things done without fanfare. When I pitched Authentic Voices, our CEO Camden looked skeptical. "Consumers don't want reality," he said. "They want aspiration." With respect, I countered, research shows the opposite. Trust in polished corporate messaging has plummeted. People crave authenticity. They can detect staged perfection instantly. My proposal was radical. Instead of scripted testimonials with actors, we would feature real clients telling their own stories in their own words. No scripts, no rehearsals, just truth that might be messy, but would be genuine. Camden reluctantly approved a pilot, expecting failure. I worked around the clock, personally interviewing nearly 100 clients. Not all were articulate, not all were photogenic, but all had stories that mattered. The first video featured Dario, an elderly man with Parkinson's. His hands trembled as he described how our therapy services helped him hold his newborn grandchild. We filmed in his modest living room. His emotion was raw, his gratitude genuine. The response was immediate. Engagement quadrupled across platforms. Real people commented with their own experiences. For the first time, our brand was part of authentic conversation rather than shouting into the void. 8 more videos followed. A teenage girl with social anxiety, a teacher whose classroom used our sensory tools, a veteran regaining independence. None were polished. All were powerful. "This is working beyond our expectations," Camden admitted during our quarterly review. "The board is impressed." That's when Linnea entered the picture. She transferred from our West Coast office, hired directly by Camden as Executive Strategic Director, a title created just for her. At first, I welcomed the support. With 3 years at a prestigious firm and a Harvard MBA, Linnea seemed like a valuable ally. "I'm so impressed with what you've created," she gushed during our first meeting. "I'd love to learn your approach." I shared everything: my research, my interview techniques, the raw footage that didn't make the final cuts, I explained why certain stories resonated more than others. 3 weeks later, I was removed from the meeting invite about the campaign's next phase. Administrative oversight, Linnea assured me when I asked. I'll forward you the notes. The notes never came. Neither did invitations to subsequent meetings. When I encountered our videographer in the hallway and asked about the next shoot, his uncomfortable expression told me everything. Linnea's handling those now, he admitted. Different direction, I guess. I scheduled time with Camden, waiting 2 weeks for a 15-minute slot. I'm concerned about being excluded from my own campaign, I said directly. Camden sighed, not meeting my eyes. Everly, we appreciate your initial concept, but the board feels we need more polish for nationwide expansion. Linnea brings experience scaling campaigns like this, but polish defeats the entire purpose. The authenticity is why it's working. We need to elevate the messaging. Linnea suggested using trained spokespeople who can articulate our values more clearly. You mean actors? I said flatly. Professional communicators, he corrected. Look, you'll still get credit for the original concept. That was a lie. Within weeks, marketing materials referred to Linnea as the creator of the Authentic Voices campaign. Press releases quoted her vision. Industry publications interviewed her about her groundbreaking approach. When our campaign was nominated for the Industry Innovation Award, the submission listed Linnea as the lead. My name appeared nowhere. I documented everything, saved emails, recorded conversations where legal, kept original drafts with my comments and timestamp. Not because I planned revenge, but because women in corporate America learned to keep receipts. The night of the gala, watching through the window as Linnea gushed about authenticity while accepting my award, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about credit. It was about the real people whose stories had been replaced with polished fakes. My message wasn't to executives or HR. It was a group text to all 50 people who had shared their stories for the original campaign. They're celebrating our campaign tonight without inviting any of you. They've replaced your stories with actors. I'm sorry I let this happen. I included side-by-side images, their authentic videos versus the new polished versions with professional storytellers. I added screenshots of the original release with my name and the new materials crediting Linnea. Then I drove to the far corner of the parking lot and waited. Within minutes, those genuine voices began doing what genuine voices do best, speaking truth. The first post came from Dario, the elderly man with Parkinson's. He shared the glossy commercial featuring an actor who looked nothing like him alongside his original raw interview. This company erased me after using my story. The real me wasn't polished enough for their fancy awards ceremony. His post caught fire immediately. Then came Yara, the teenage girl with social anxiety. They filmed me for hours, promised my story would help others like me. Now they've replaced me with someone prettier, more articulate. But she's not real. She's not me. One by one, the authentic voices I had amplified discovered they'd been silenced and replaced. Their collective response became deafening. As I sat in my car, notifications flooded my phone. Some tagged our company directly. Others contacted journalists who had covered our campaign. A few took screenshots of Camden's previous statements about honest storytelling alongside pictures of the actors who had replaced them. That's when I saw him, Camden bursting through the gala doors, phone pressed to his ear, scanning the parking lot. When he spotted my car, he broke into a run. I considered driving away but decided against it. This confrontation was inevitable. He reached my window, breathing heavily. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening air. What have you done? His voice cracked with panic, rather than anger. I rolled down my window. I haven't done anything except tell the truth. They're destroying us online. The journalists inside are all leaving to cover this instead of our award. Investors are texting me. You need to make it stop. How would I do that? Ask 50 people who were exploited and then discarded to stay quiet about it? That's not how authenticity works, Camden. He ran his hand through his graying hair. Look, I understand you're upset about credit. This isn't about credit, I interrupted. This is about integrity. You took a campaign about honesty and authenticity and filled it with lies. What did you expect would happen? Camden glanced back at the building. Through the glass, I could see commotion inside. Executives huddled around phones. Several people were heading toward the exits. We can fix this, he said, desperation edging his voice. We'll acknowledge your contribution publicly. Restore your title. double your salary. And what about them? The real people whose stories made this campaign successful in the first place. The ones you replaced with professional communicators? He waved dismissively. We'll figure something out. Make donations to their causes or whatever. Just tell me what it will take to make this go away. His response crystallized everything. Camden still didn't understand that authenticity wasn't something you could buy or fake. Nothing will make this go away, I said. That's what happens with truth. It stays. But I'll come inside to help manage this on one condition. Name it, he said quickly. You immediately announce that the campaign is returning to its original vision. No more actors. The real people with real stories get reinstated. Camden hesitated, calculating the costs. That would mean scrapping millions in production, which will be nothing compared to what you'll lose if you don't. Your choice. As we walked back toward the building, my phone buzzed with a text from Mira, the nursing home director whose tearful testimony had been replaced by a former soap opera actress. They didn't think we were good enough to tell our own stories, but we're good enough to tell the truth about them. Inside, the atmosphere had transformed from celebration to crisis management. Linnea stood at the center of a group of executives, her face flushed with anger as she gestured at her phone. You, she spat when she saw me. Do you have any idea what you've done? We worked for months to elevate this campaign. Elevate? I echoed. You mean sanitize. Strip away everything that made it powerful. We made it marketable, she snapped. Those rambling interviews were never going to scale nationally. Those rambling interviews tripled engagement and saved this company, I countered. And now the people you erased are showing everyone the difference between authentic voices and manufactured ones. Camden stepped between us. Enough. We need solutions, not arguments. Linnea thrust her phone forward. It's too late for solutions. Look at this. On her screen was a side-by-side comparison video that had already accumulated thousands of shares. On one side, Jessie, a mother whose child had benefited from our services, speaking from her heart about her struggles. On the other, the polished actress who had replaced her, reciting nearly identical lines but with perfect hair, perfect lighting, and not a single genuine emotion. The comments were brutal. Corporate fakery exposed. They preach authenticity while erasing real people. Hypocrites. Camden's phone rang. He stepped away to answer, his shoulders tensing as he listened. When he returned, his face had lost all color. That was the chairman. The board is convening an emergency meeting in the morning. He looked at me. They want you there. Why? I asked. Because somehow you've created both the problem and the only potential solution. Linnea's perfectly composed facade finally cracked. This is absurd. She sabotaged our campaign out of jealousy. And you're rewarding her? I told the truth. I corrected. The only sabotage happened when you replaced authentic stories with fakes, while still calling the campaign Authentic Voices. Camden's expression turned calculating. Perhaps we can spin this. A planned reveal, showing the contrast between raw and refined messaging as part of a larger conversation about representation in media. The suggestion was so cynical, it momentarily stunned me into silence. He was still looking for an angle, a way to manipulate rather than change. You still don't get it, I finally said. You can't spin authenticity. It either is or it isn't. Before Camden could respond, a woman I didn't recognize approached our group. She held up a press badge. Fiona Keller, Business Insider. I'd like to speak with whoever can explain why your company replaced real client testimonials with actors while claiming to champion authenticity. Camden stepped forward with a practiced smile. There seems to be some confusion. We've always valued authentic storytelling. I created the original campaign, I interrupted, extending my hand to Fiona. And I'd be happy to explain exactly what happened. The look Camden gave me could have frozen fire. But we both knew he couldn't stop me without making everything worse. I'll need statements from both of you, Fiona said, looking between us. And I'm interviewing Dario Singh tomorrow morning. He's quite eager to share his experience. Dario? Camden asked, confusion evident. The elderly gentleman with Parkinson's from your original campaign, I explained. The one whose story about holding his grandchild moved thousands to engage with our brand. The one you replaced with a silver-haired model who could hold a coffee cup without trembling. Recognition dawned on Camden's face, followed quickly by alarm. I could almost see him calculating the optics of a vulnerable elderly man, telling the world how a corporation had deemed his genuine struggle too messy for their polished image. We seem to have made a significant misstep, Camden conceded, his tone shifting to damage control, which we're committed to rectifying immediately. He turned to me. Everly, perhaps you could help us reconnect with the original participants? The request was both an olive branch and a trap. He wanted to use my relationships with these people to contain the damage. They're already connected, with each other, I said. What started as my marketing campaign has become their community. They're talking, sharing, organizing. As if on cue, my phone lit up with another notification. A live stream had started, featuring 7 of the original participants, discussing how corporations co-opt authentic experiences. 20,000 viewers and climbing. You need to shut this down, Linnea hissed. I couldn't if I wanted to, I replied honestly. And I don't want to. This is what real authenticity looks like. Messy, uncontrolled, and true. Fiona observed our exchange with interest. I'd like to include that perspective in my article, if you're willing to go on record. Before I could answer, the emergency exit doors burst open. The chairman himself, Victor, had arrived. At 73, he rarely attended events like this, preferring to maintain his enigmatic presence from a distance. Victor surveyed the chaos of the gala. Executives huddled in crisis mode, journalists abandoning the official program to follow the unfolding story, the award sitting abandoned on the podium. His gaze finally landed on me. You, he said simply. My office. Now. As Victor turned to leave, expecting me to follow, Camden grabbed my arm. Be very careful, he warned in a low voice. Victor built this company from nothing. He won't tolerate anyone threatening it. I gently removed his hand. I'm not threatening the company. I'm saving its soul. Following Victor through the confused crowd, I noticed something unexpected. Employees, junior staff, assistants, people who normally blended into the background, were watching me. Not with judgment, but with something that looked remarkably like respect. The elevator ride to Victor's top-floor office was silent. I had never been in his private sanctuary before. Few had. What awaited me there would either end my career forever or transform it in ways I couldn't yet imagine. Victor's office occupied the entire top floor of the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city's nightscape, a perfect backdrop for power. The space itself was surprisingly austere. No flashy artwork or imposing desk, just simple, quality furnishings that whispered rather than shouted wealth. The man himself stood with his back to me, hands clasped behind him as he gazed at the skyline. 37 years, he said without turning. That's how long I've built this company. Survived 3 recessions, 2 market crashes, and countless competitors trying to put us out of business. He finally faced me, and in one evening, a text message from you has created more damage than any of those things. His tone wasn't angry. It was evaluative. The damage wasn't caused by my message, I replied. It was caused by replacing authenticity with fakery, while still calling it authentic voices. Victor's eyebrow raised slightly. Most employees wouldn't dare speak to him so directly. Sit, he said, indicating a chair across from his. I did, keeping my back straight, hands folded in my lap. Victor remained standing. You understand I could fire you right now, he stated. Yes, and ensure you never work in this industry again. Probably. Yet you don't seem afraid. I considered this. I'm terrified, but not of losing my job. I'm afraid of what happens when companies like ours convince people that polished lies are better than messy truths. We had something real and powerful, and we threw it away for… What? An award? A cleaner aesthetic? Victor studied me with unnerving intensity. What exactly did you hope to accomplish tonight? Justice, I answered honestly. Not just for me, but for the real people whose stories created the success that others are now claiming credit for. Victor moved to the window again, his reflection visible in the glass. For a man in his 70s, he carried himself with remarkable energy. Your campaign, he said slowly, was the most successful initiative this company has launched in 15 years. I blinked, surprised by this acknowledgement. Not Linnea's campaign. A brief smile touched his lips. I've been in business long enough to recognize the difference between creators and climbers. Camden brought Linnea in because your approach made him nervous. Too unpredictable. Too honest. You knew? Victor turned. I read every report, watch every campaign. Did you think I wouldn't notice when the genuine emotion that characterized your work suddenly transformed into polished performances? Or when your name disappeared from the materials? If you noticed, why didn't you stop it? Because business isn't fair, Everly. I wanted to see what you would do about it. The realization hit me. This had been a test, one that most women in corporate America would recognize. Stay quiet and get overlooked, or speak up and get labeled difficult. So tonight was my evaluation, I said, anger finally seeping into my voice. And what about the real people who shared their stories? Were they just pawns in your corporate chess game? Victor's expression hardened. Mind your tone. No, I said, standing up. You just admitted you watched while my work was stolen, and real people were exploited and discarded. You could have stepped in at any point. You chose not to. We stood facing each other, the power dynamic momentarily forgotten in the raw honesty of the moment. You're right, Victor finally said. I could have intervened. Perhaps I should have. But then I never would have seen what you're truly capable of, which is creating a movement that can't be controlled by corporate interests. Not even mine. Do you know what's happening right now? Those 50 people you connected are organizing. They're sharing more than just their stories about our company. They're validating each other's experiences across the board. He picked up a tablet from the side table and handed it to me. On screen was a rapidly growing online community called Authentic Voices, already thousands strong. The description read, real stories, real people, no filters, no corporate editing. You've created something far beyond a marketing campaign, Victor said. Something I couldn't buy with all the resources of this company. I handed the tablet back, confused about where this conversation was heading. So, am I fired or not? Victor laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his severe appearance. Fired? Quite the opposite. I want to offer you a new position. I don't understand. Camden clearly can't recognize the value of authenticity, or he wouldn't have allowed your work to be diluted. Linnea sees authenticity as something to be manufactured rather than nurtured. Both approaches miss the point entirely. He walked to his desk and pressed a button. A screen descended from the ceiling, displaying financial charts. Our stock is already responding to tonight's events. Analysts are calling it a transparency crisis. By morning, we could lose millions in market value. I'm sorry, I said automatically. Don't be. This company needed a wake-up call. We've grown too comfortable with controlled messaging, too afraid of genuine human connection with all its messiness and unpredictability. He turned back to me. I'm creating a new division within the company. Authentic engagement. Independent from marketing. Direct report to me. I want you to lead it. The offer was so unexpected I couldn't immediately respond. Why would you trust me after I essentially created a PR crisis? Because you did it out of principle, not malice. Because you understand something Camden and Linnea never will, that in a world drowning in polished content, real authenticity is the only thing that truly breaks through. My mind raced. Was this another corporate trap? A way to contain the damage by bringing me back into the fold? What exactly would this division do? I asked cautiously. Whatever you think it should, with one condition. You find a way to make things right with the 50 people whose stories were exploited. And Linnea? Camden? Victor's expression turned grim. That's being handled separately. Before I could press for details, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and sighed. The board meeting has been moved up. They're assembling now. Tonight? Crisis management. I need your answer before I go in. The practical side of me calculated the advantages of the offer. A director-level position, autonomy, vindication. But something felt wrong. What if I don't want to come back? What if the damage to trust is too great? Victor considered this. Then we lose one of our most valuable assets. And rightly so. Companies that can't retain principled people don't deserve them. The sincerity in his voice surprised me. I need time to think, I said, and to talk to the people whose stories started all this. Fair enough, but I need something to tell the board tonight. I took a deep breath. Tell them I'll consider returning under certain conditions. A public acknowledgement of what happened, reinstatement of the original campaign participants with fair compensation, and complete transparency about the mistakes made. Victor nodded slowly. Reasonable terms. Though some board members will resist the public acknowledgement, then they haven't learned anything from this. A ghost of a smile touched his face. Indeed. As we headed to the door, Victor paused. One question. How did you know those 50 people would respond so powerfully to your message? Because they're genuine. When you connect real people around authentic experiences, they don't need scripts or direction. They already know exactly what to say. The board meeting was tense but productive. Victor, true to his word, presented my conditions without dilution. Several board members objected, particularly to the public acknowledgement portion. We can handle this internally, one insisted. Public admission creates unnecessary liability. Unnecessary for whom? I countered. The entire campaign was built on transparency and authenticity. Handling this behind closed doors contradicts everything we claim to value. After 3 hours of debate, they agreed to my terms, though not without resistance. By morning, our company would issue a statement acknowledging the replacement of real participants with actors and apologizing for the misrepresentation. The original 50 people would be invited back, compensated fairly, and given creative control over how their stories were shared. As for leadership changes, Camden was reassigned to a different division. Linnea resigned before she could be fired, though industry rumors suggest she struggled to find equivalent work afterward. The marketing team was restructured under new leadership that reported directly to my new division. The most remarkable outcome wasn't corporate at all. The Authentic Voices community that formed that night continued to grow. What began as my marketing concept evolved into something I could never have planned, a self-sustaining network of people supporting each other through shared experiences. 6 months later, I stood on a different stage at a different event. No crystal trophies or champagne flutes here, just real people gathered in an ordinary community center. When I first interviewed all of you for a marketing campaign, I thought I was creating content, I told the group. What I didn't realize was that I was actually building a community. You didn't need me or any company to validate your stories. You just needed to be connected to each other. Dario approached the microphone, his hands still trembling but his voice steady. We may not be polished, but we're real, and that's something no corporate decision can ever take away from us. As I watched the room full of authentic voices, some speaking eloquently, others stumbling over words, all genuine, I realized that my revenge hadn't simply been exposing the lies. It had been revealing a more powerful truth. Authenticity can't be scripted, stolen, or silenced. Sometimes the most revolutionary act in a world of corporate calculation is simply telling the truth and letting it spread on its own. The Authentic Voices community eventually became its own nonprofit entity, independent from any corporate control. I remained involved as an advisor while continuing to transform my company's approach to genuine engagement. The original campaign that had been sanitized was restored to its raw authenticity and became case study material for marketing ethics courses. The chairman, Victor, often says that the most valuable crisis in the company's history was the one I created. It forced us to decide what kind of company we truly wanted to be. He tells new hires, one that presents polished illusions, or one that embraces authentic reality, even when it's messy. As for me, I learned that the most effective revenge isn't about destruction at all. It's about creation, building something so genuinely valuable that those who once dismissed you are forced to recognize what they lost. In a world obsessed with perfection, authenticity remains the one thing that cannot be convincingly faked, and therefore, the one thing truly worth fighting for. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more narratives about finding power in authenticity. Share your own experiences in the comments below. After all, your authentic voice matters too.